Um, Here we go. God's got a sense of humor because He's got me up here, and it's not a place that I am prepared to be, not a place I thought to be, and not a place I feel like I'm able to be. But God and many people here, I know, have prayed for me to be able to be here and say what I need to say, but I don't want it to be my words. I really want to share what God would have me to share. And up until right now, He hasn't clued me in on that yet. So I'm just, I'll wait on Him on that. But I also want to add, like Laura Lee said, that we are so incredibly grateful as a family to everyone that has loved on us in this time, the camp staff and family of the camp, and just everyone from around the country and even around the world have been amazingly wonderful to us. I wish I could do like Dad and mention every name. He had a good memory for a long time to recall names, and I didn't inherit that. But you guys know who you are, and from the bottom of our hearts, we do thank you. Some of y'all here probably know Dad longer than I did, and I'd like to hear some of the stories probably that I've never heard yet. But a couple of years ago, I kidnapped him and flew him up to Georgia, and we went to a monastery together. And I spent 3 days with him, just talking with him and recording some of his life story. Some of the things that, some of the stories I had never ever heard before, actually, and he shared those in a remarkable way. And as I listened to those again over and over, I am so grateful to God for giving me that opportunity to be with him at that time. And I got to know Dad in a different way. When I got into my teenage years out of the camp, me and Dad had a problem. More than just the haircuts he wanted us to get down at Warren's Barbershop in Indiantown, which we always fought about. We also didn't get along in some other ways. And I think out of all the kids, he and I really had a tough relationship for a long time. But God's healed that relationship, and He's healed it in a big way. And today, I can tell you that I am the most proud person in the world to be called His son. I shared with our pastor at Christ Fellowship, Todd Mullins, a couple weeks ago that we had called in hospice to help take care of Dad. And he just looked at me because he knew Dad, and he said, "Son, you are blessed." And I can honestly say I am very blessed. Dad shared some things with me about his childhood, and like I said, some I didn't remember or I'd never heard, but he had a tough childhood. For those that don't know it, he was raised in an alcoholic family. His mother had married him multiple times. His father died as an alcoholic on Skid Row in Miami. Dad, as a young man, had to go down there and identify his body. And the only thing he left him was a little newspaper bag where he sold newspapers. Dad was left alone a lot. He grew up at an early age. He told me about having to go down to the bar in Miami and try to get his mother home after she'd been there for some time. He told me about going into one of the bars here in Okeechobee when he was a young man, I think maybe 8 or 9. And he asked the bartender not to sell his mother and daddy any more liquor. And the bartender looked at him and he said, "Son, if they got the money, I got to sell it to them. You get the hell out of here." Some years later, when Dad came back from seminary, he came back to Okeechobee. And he said God told him to go to every bartender in the town and pray with them. And Dad said he had an argument with God about that. He said, "God, you know I don't like bartenders." But God won out. Dad humbled himself, and he went to every bar in the town, including the bar with the same bartender that threw him out as a kid. And he asked him, "Would you let me pray with you?" And the guy did. Dad said he didn't really like to preach too much. That wasn't his thing, but he was a good preacher. But he loved the unlovable. He touched people in a way that it was just unreal how he could connect with people. He told me about the time when he was dating Mom, and he wasn't saved at that time, and he was pretty broken and wounded, but he went to a revival here in town because Granny and Grandpa said he had to. I think maybe Mom did too. But anyway, this preacher started preaching. He was a young guy, I guess, and he started talking about the love of God, and that God loves sinners, and when Dad told me this story, he says, I sat back there in the back, and I listened to him, and I just got so upset because I knew this guy was wrong. Somebody ought to get up there and stop him and tell him that he was wrong. God didn't love sinners. He didn't. He loved church folks that were all dressed up and good people and went to church all the time and weren't poor and he said this guy had wrong theology. And he went back the next night and the preacher did the same thing. And Dad, again, he thought, well, the preacher of the church is going to get up there and correct this guy now, because you can't let him go on like that. God doesn't love sinners. But something happened to Dad. I think it was the third night. God got a hold of him, a sinner, and when he started walking down, he said, the Spirit came upon me in a powerful way, and it changed his life. And he was never the same after that. He talked about some other experiences where the Spirit came upon him and changed his life, changed ours too. When he got the vision for Dunklin, he told me about it. He says, I was up all night, I couldn't sleep, this thing was just burning in my heart. And I think he woke up Mom the next morning and tried to tell her about it, and I don't think she quite saw the same thing he did, but we followed him out and to a swamp, down a long dirt road, no telephone, no friends, no TV, no air conditioning, and so began the journey of Dunklin Memorial Camp. And some amazing, incredible people came alongside him that God sent into our lives, and a lot of those are still with us. And so many miracles have been in place to grow Dunklin what it is. But it's not, again, as you said, the place. It's the people there, and it's what God has done in those people. And I know Dad is very, very proud of all of y'all. If I can find it, I'll share his favorite verse with you. I asked him what his favorite verse was. He said Isaiah 40. And I'd like to read it. Do you not know, have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings as eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. These last few years, Dad's not been able to run, certainly, and he got to the point where he couldn't walk very good. But the hardest thing for Dad was that he couldn't journal anymore. He had a tremor in his hand and he couldn't write, and that really broke his heart. He loved to be in communion with God. For him to get up and go out in the woods wasn't just a time of relaxation. He desired an intimacy with God, and he desired it more and more as he got older and older, and he wanted to convince others that was the most important thing for them to do as well. We get so busy. When Dad and I arrived at the monastery, it was the first day. It was okay, but something was bothering him, and by the second day, though, he said he told me he had to repent of something. And I asked him what it was, and he said, well, I've been so involved in watching the news and getting involved with the things going on in the world that I haven't spent enough time with the Lord. And I miss it, and I lost my peace for a while, but I got it back. He wanted everyone to know how to take that inner journey, to have that relationship with the Lord, that intimate relationship that'll give you strength in the time that you need it. Dad wasn't comfortable with this old age thing. He wasn't comfortable with this body that was wearing out. But I'm thankful to God that God told him to get ready to come home. It was about a month ago that he told Mom one night that he felt like his days were short. Dad talked a lot about going to heaven for years. That's where he wanted to go, and someone said the sooner the better. But this one, when he said this, it was something different about it. And when I learned about it, something in my heart said we need to take it serious. And we called hospice, and they evaluated him and took him on as a patient. I took off from work to be with him. And we prepared for Dad to go home. I'm grateful to God for giving us that time. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Not $1 million. I wish I had one more day of it. But I know one thing for sure. I'm going to have eons of it. And I wish I could be just be aware of a little bit of what's going on in heaven right now. I'd love to hear Dad's first conversation he had with Christopher. After the Lord, the first person he wanted to see actually was Miss Mary. And I can hear her now just hugging his neck and saying, "You're so precious. Welcome home." And I can see Al and all the other guys that have gone on before him just just getting ready to sing Amazing Grace with us. It's a big crowd, probably bigger than what we got here now. But I know they're all telling Dad, "Thank you. My life that was changed because of you." But he would want to give all the glory to God. He said, one other thing, I'm not to have a funeral, so don't tell anybody you've been to a funeral today. This is a celebration service, and I celebrate his life. I celebrate the fact that I'm his son, and I'm forever grateful. My brother David wrote something he asked me to read. I'm going to try to do that. My dad understood and loved drug addicts, alcoholics, and cowboys. But since there were none of these in our house, he didn't know what to do with us. I know he had no father figure to model himself after, but his passion for directing Dunklin far exceeded his interest in parenting. I'm sure Dad read well over 1,000 books, and I'm sure not one of them was about being a better father. But before you think I'm bitter and being too critical of Dad, I'll tell you that he recognized his earthly failures and spent the last part of his life making amends. When his age forced him to slow down and take a less demanding role at Dunklin, he began to actually enjoy spending time with the family. I thank Hugh, Nick, and all the staff at Dunklin for taking the load off an old man and giving him time to be a dad. One story I'd like to share with you to illustrate Dad's parenting style. When I was young, along with a couple of other kids, we smuggled a bottle of wine into camp. Of course, we were caught, and I was forced to go through the entire rehab program. I believe I was 14 or 15 years old at the time. I do think I became his favorite son after that. Dad had a great sense of humor. I think he passed it on to us. That humor allowed us to bring up painful experiences from our past in a non-threatening way. and I think the healing of childhood scars for all of us began to heal. One more thing I'll tell you about Dad. When he was no longer able to read his books because of his failing eyesight, I started looking for movies that he might enjoy. Let me tell you, it's hard to find movies that Dad would approve of. But I did manage to find a few, and since I really enjoy films, we finally had an activity that we could really enjoy together. His favorite movie, the gravest story ever told, True Grit. The original, of course, with John Wayne. That movie gave him hours of entertainment. He must have watched it at least a half a dozen times. It's a story of a one-eyed alcoholic cowboy marshal. Can you see why he might have enjoyed this movie? As I said, Dad loved addicts and cowboys. Men like Norman Stokes, Junior Mills, Glenn Bass, and Hubert Waldron. I think he modeled his parenting style after these men. He was a tough father during my childhood. In his later years, his grandchildren would get to know him as a nice and young old man. What a change. Dad lived a larger-than-life kind of life. He was the most godly man I ever knew, the hardest working, and in his later years, a generous father. He loved nothing more than a visit from any one of his children, especially me. I could probably go on for hours and hours and not fill the whole story of his life. But he's left a great legacy, and I want to make him proud. And one of the things that his trademark saying is, again, has anybody told you today? But it was more than just a trite saying. He really meant it. And he followed it up with, I love you. This week, as I was trying to figure out a way to just honor him, I mean, all kinds of things went through my head. But I had some bands made up, and I put the initials to that on there, and I want people to have those. And I want people to, when somebody asks, what does those initials mean? That you tell them, and then you do love them. Because that's what Dad was all about. And if you do that, you're honoring him. Thank you. Okay, y'all have been sitting long enough, and I want to stretch your legs for a couple minutes. Let's do a love offering. I think Dad would be happy with that. We're not taking a collection. No money goes in his hat. But just get up and love on somebody, and just get a couple minutes, and then we'll take our seats again. Thank you.
Have anyone told you lately? I love you. Come on, let us be seated. We're going to share a song. Come on, Mr. Sound Man.
Have I told you lately that I love you? Have I told you there's no one else above you? You fill my heart gladness, take away my sadness, ease my trouble, that's what you do. From the morning sun is in its glory, meets the day with hope and comfort too. Fill my life with laughter, my trouble, that's what you do. There's a love that's defined between your heart and mine, like the sun. At the end of the day, we should give thanks and pray to the one, to the one. Have I told you lately that I love you? Have I told you there's no one else above you? Fill my heart with gladness, take away my sadness, and ease my